Record. Good evening, YouTubers. It is 9:24 p.m. on the 11th of February, 2013. It is 35 degrees out. Maybe we'll stay above freezing tonight, but I doubt it because we're in for we have a wind advisor in effect. It's supposed to be windy as all heck tonight. Alright. Now we are on chapter. I'm going to do chapter 2 of that, their dispensary truth or God's plan and purpose for the ages is what we're going over. And we did the prophetic word. That was the first one. This is Pre-Millennialism is number 2, which is dispensational truth. Chapter 2, Pre-Millennialism. And it'll probably be broken down into parts also, because it looks like it's a good couple of sections. So. But I'll be smart this time, and I'll wait, I won't be able to do it that way unless I upload them. Never mind. The time of the second coming of Christ is the key that unlocks all dispensational truth. The vast majority of Christians believe in the personal return of the Lord, but they differ as to time. They are divided into 2 schools, pre-millennialists and the post-millennialists. The pre-millennialists believe that Christ will return before the millennium. The post-millennialists that he will not come until after. By the millennium is meant the period of 1,000 years mentioned in Revelations 21-3. It is a common but wholly erroneous impression that pre-millennialists base their belief mainly, if not solely, on this passage in the Apocalypse. The fact is, the question of whether Christ's returns will precede or follow the millennium antedates the Apocalypse. The Old Testament prophets in plain language and in glowing terms foretold an era or age of universal righteousness and peace on this earth under the reign of Messiah the Prince. That the disciples were not mistaken. That the disciples were not mistaken in their belief in such an earthly kingdom, ruled over by their promised Messiah, is event from the fact that Jesus never reproved them for holding such a belief. And after his resurrection and previous to his ascension, when they asked him if he would at that time restore the kingdom to Israel, Acts 1:6, he did not say, "You are mistaken in your ideal of an earthly kingdom. The kingdom I came to set up, and that was meant by the prophets, is the spiritual kingdom." But he said, "It is not for you to know the times and season, that is, when it shall be set up." The whole teaching of the Old Testament as to the coming of the Messiah is pre-millennial. The only use the pre-millennialites have for the 1,000-year passage in Revelation chapter 20, verse 1-3, is to fix the length of that age of righteousness and peace. In fact, Jewish traditions based on the Sabbatic rest of generation 2, 1 through 3, taught that the 7,000th year from the creation was to be a period of Sabbatic rest, or what we call the millennium. The passage in Revelation simply confirms this tradition. Expunge the passage, and you do not weaken the argument. You only leave as uncertain the length of time that age shall last. Let's see what time length. All right. The apostolic church was premillennial. For over 200 years, no other view was entertained. The writing of the church fathers bound in evidence of the fact, but about AD 250, Origen, one of the church fathers, conceived the idea that the words of Scripture were but the husk in which was hid the kernel of Scripture truth. At once he began to allegorize and scripturalize the Scriptures, and thus founded the school of allegorizing and spiritualizing interpreters of Scripture, from which the Church and the Bible have suffered so much. The result was that the Church largely ceased to look for the Lord to return and set up an earthly kingdom. When Constantine became sole emperor of Rome in AD 323, being favorable to Christianity, he united church and state. A new difficulty now arose in the interpretation of Scripture. If, as was at the time believed, Rome was to be the seat of Antichrist, the question arose, or rather was suspiciously whispered, is Constantine the Antichrist? Such a notion was unpalatable to the Roman Empire, and so a covenant explanation was discovered and adopted that Antichrist was pagan Rome, and that the millennium commenced when Constantine ascended the throne. This was given color by the great gifts and privileges bestowed on the church by Constantine, and led to the claim that the millennium blessing of the Old Testament has been transferred from the Jews to the Christian church. But the claim that the papal church was the Antichrist would not. But the claim that the papal church was the Antichrist would not down. When it was found impossible to expunge the book of Revelations from the sacred canon, it was decided to lock up the Scriptures, and the Bible became a sealed book, and the gloom of night settled down upon all Christendom. The result was the Dark Ages. But amid the gloom, God was not without witnesses to the truth. The Paulicians, Albigeans, Waldenses, and other sects bore testimonies to the pre-millennial return of the Lord. But the darkness was not eternal. When the fullness of time was come, the morning star of the Reformation, John Wycliffe, arose, and was soon followed by the sun, Martin Luther, the brightness of whose light dispelled the darkness. The doctrine of the premillennial return of the Lord was revived, but the reformers did not go far enough. The period was one of the religious strife and the formation of new religious sects. The result was an ebb of spirituality and the growth of rationalism, which refused to believe that the world was fast ripening for judgment, and a new interpretation of the millennium reign of Christ was demanded. This interpretation was furnished by the Reverend Daniel Whitby, In 1638 through 1640, a clergyman of the Church of England who claimed that in reading the promises made to the Jews in the Old Testament of their restoration as a nation. Joey, honey. Joey, honey. A clergyman of the Church of England who claimed that in reading the promises made to the Jews in the Old Testament of the restoration as a nation and the reestablishment of the throne of David, he was led to see that these promises were spiritually and applied to the church. This view he called a new hypothesis. And I am going to stop this one here because I don't think I'll get the... No. Okay. Yeah, I'll stop it there. Alright. And I will be back, my brothers and sisters. Peace be with you. I love you. Be safe.